Well, the Theagenesis was a vision that I had in 1970, and I'm not going to try to go into the details of how the vision was accomplished, but essentially it was going back through the river of DNA that connects all of life back to the original source. So life on Earth today comprises trillions of organisms of all sorts, but all of it can be traced back to one original starting point. And that concept that all of this life is all one DNA, all one continuity, starting from a single point, is in fact the essence of the whole Theagenesis vision. Because the idea is that just as we begin with a single fertilized cell, and with all the trillions and trillions of cells we eventually become as they all multiply and divide, they still all carry the same protoplasm and the same DNA. Because when cells divide, they don't send off offspring, they just simply split in half. And that is crucial to the entire concept. So just as we remain a single living organism, despite the fact we are composed of trillions of cells, the fact that we originate from a single fertilized cell makes us one continuous single organism with a single personality and a single identity. And just so, billions of years ago, life appeared on Earth as soon as there was water to sustain it. It appeared just like the water from space, because the water did not originate from Earth, and neither did the life upon it. It always came in with comets. But for 2.5 billion years, it was just single cell life. Nothing happened. Nothing was connected, just like an ovum is waiting as a single cell, waiting for fertilization. That point of fertilization occurred on the Earth 544 million years ago, at a moment we call the Cambrian Explosion, when suddenly, with no precursors, a huge array of complex multicellular organisms appeared. Over 26 phyla have been identified from the Burgess Shale in Canada. Today we have only 7 phyla of life on Earth, so of complex life, so most of them didn't make it. Most of them just simply died out. But from those few that survived, that moment of fertilization, just like the moment of fertilization in a human being, is the point of conception. That point of conception of Gaia occurred 500 million years ago, and from that moment, all of life on Earth is one continuous superorganism. The entire biosphere of the Earth is one living biological organism on a biological state, not a metaphorical, not a hypothetical, not a mythical, but biologically. We all contain the same DNA. We all contain the unique complex gene structure that was introduced at that point, which is called the homeobox genes, or HOX. And therefore, all life is one single vast living organism that every culture on the planet has always known as Mother Earth. And there are many names for her. I initially applied the term Theagenesis, which means the birth of the goddess, to this concept. And I wrote an article and many subsequent follow-ups that galvanized the entire pagan community back at that time. We're talking 1970. 3 years later, in 1973, James Lovelock, a British atmospheric chemist, published his Gaia hypothesis. But he was looking at the whole concept of Earth from the outside in. He was an atmospheric biochemist, and his assignment was to try to identify from the atmospheric components what planets might have life, trying to figure out what qualities would be observable from space or from a distance. And the planets that he observed whose atmospheres exhibited the qualities of life were Earth and Jupiter, and no others that he observed at that time. And this is because of the composition of the reducing atmosphere. So, the Theagenesis concept had already exploded throughout the pagan community by that time, and it was reprinted in countless publications and discussed at countless meetings, and the entire community basically had adopted the vision of Mother Earth as the primal goddess before the scientific community picked it up. But they never picked up the idea that this is a biological quality emerging from the essence of life on a biological level. They were only looking at Lovelock's presentation, which was from the outside in, as I say. So this is why I feel that the Theagenesis vision is crucial. However, idea of the living planet, of the living biosphere as a single organism, is not an original one at all, even though I made this presentation and put it in technical and scientific terms, and I spent a lot of time researching all the implications. I looked into the structure of the amino acids found in meteorites, for example, and the dextro versus levodoration of the molecules, and all kinds of stuff in the whole history of it. But I'd been studying paleontology all my life. It was one of my passions, so it all just kind of fell together. In essence, the thesis is that what we call evolution, the evolution of life on Earth, is simply the embryology of a global superorganism, the entire biosphere itself. And this notion is maybe found throughout history. Many of the great teachers and philosophers and wizards of old, people like Leonardo da Vinci, for example, and Plato and Socrates, this idea goes way back. It's found in the teachings of almost all indigenous peoples. It's found in Hinduism. It's found everywhere. The idea that the entire planet is a single living organism. But it had not been phrased in technical and scientific terms until my Theagenesis article, which tied it all together and linked it up with all these traditions. After many decades of this, in 1998, after a couple of years of work, I produced a physical representation of this idea in the form of the Millennial Gaia, which instantly became the best-selling figure of all of our array of a couple of dozen altar figures of gods and goddesses that I created during the 80s and 90s. And she has had incredible popularity. It's all in here, the entire message. The little critters in the back of her hair represent all the orders of vertebrate life, and they're all there, all 27 of them. And the braids of her hair represent the DNA woven strands, which shape the branches of the tree of life. And if you actually look at it, you can trace the relationships among all of these in that. And for example, there's a big cutoff at the Cretaceous-Tertiary boundary 65 million years ago, when 98% of all life on Earth was extinguished by a major asteroid impact. And so on it goes. And at the very top of the cranium, we have a representation of the two of the greatest intelligences on the planet today, humans and whales. And so both of them are there in respectively the left and right hemispheres to convey that idea. So there's a lot of symbolism. Around her face are the the leaves of the 13 trees of the Celtic alphabet. From her legs, all of the life in the sea proceeds out from her womb, from the most simple creatures of the Cambrian Explosion to the complex creatures of the modern world. It's all there. Her arms represent the forests, the tropical rainforest and the redwood rainforest. Both of those are represented. Her left breast is the moon, which makes the heartbeat of the earth, so I put this over the heart. Her right breast is a cornucopia of the nourishing fruits and vegetables that we eat. And right at the center of the navel, which is why the positioning of the continents is arranged like this, is the Oracle of Delphi, because Delphi was considered to be the navel of the world. In fact, the word Delphi means womb. So all of the symbolism of this, and there's a whole charts and diagrams, there's a big brochure that comes with this, explains it all. And she has become immensely popular. Thousands and thousands of these have been produced on altars everywhere, all over the world. And we are now producing a larger version, 16 inches tall, and still planning to do a life-size version of a garden Gaia, of which we've had two somewhat unsatisfactory prototypes and are working on finally getting it right. But that's it, basically. And the reason this is important is that I think it is crucial for us as humans in this modern time to realize that we are all together. We are all part of one vast organism. What affects one part affects any other, just as if we do a lobotomy or an operation or surgically remove or amputate any part of our own body, the entire body is affected. And so what happens with humanity, what effects we have on the environment, affects not just ourselves and the things that we see, but the entirety of the superorganism that is our very living planet. And furthermore, it is extremely probable, I believe certain, that we are not the only living planet in the universe, since life came here from space, born in comets. I'm sure that the same thing has happened many other places, and that there are many other planetary organisms, that in fact a biosphere is a kind of a like galactic species that I think we will find throughout the universe. And we will find, I believe, that we will share certain DNA elements with all life that we discover everywhere. And it's important for us to know that we are all children of the same mother, and we are also cells in her vast body. And this is the fundamental teaching of the wisdom of the ages, which are summed up in a phrase by Cicero, omnia vivant, omnia inter se connexa, which means everything is alive, everything is interconnected.